Hello and welcome to another review. So this review is of Weapons of the Week, and this is by James C. Scott. This is chapter 1 called Small Arms Fire, I believe. Small Arms Fire in the Class War. So he starts the chapter talking about a character called Razak, who is basically the character, this person in a village who absolutely everyone in the village undermines and practically ignores. And he gives this ethnographic example of at Razak's funeral for his daughter that's recently died. Everyone was there, like a quantity of people were there, not as much as another example he gives, but there was people there paying their respects, and they were ignoring Razak. He was just sitting in the corner mourning his daughter, and they wasn't really paying him much attention. And he also talks about how people often make jokes about Razak because he has many exploits. Like what he does is he because he's very poor, he will take advantage of charity. And in the Muslim community that they all live in, they are supposed to give rice to their neighbours. And what they're supposed to do, or this is what it says in the book, what they're supposed to do is wait for rice to be given to them. And this guy Razak will go round to everybody's houses and ask directly for rice. And this book points out how, even though many people in the village find the things Razak does quite offensive, it is actually quite an efficient way of getting food. And he points out that Razak is it's like as you go along. At first, I felt very sorry for him, but as you go along, you see how it's sort of he is in one way kind of making his situation worse, and in another way he kind of needs to do these things because to survive. So, but as the book goes along throughout this chapter, you realise that it doesn't really matter about that. The point that they're really making is they're using Razak as an example of what I'll go into in a minute. So they use Razak as an example, and they compare him to this other character called Haj Brum. And Haj Brum is basically the opposite of Razak. He is an ultra rich person who actually at the time of the ethnography wasn't alive, but because he is remembered so intensely and discussed so much throughout the community, they included him in the ethnography because so many people talk about him. And what he was basically a rice field baron, and he used many manipulative methods that go against the Quran to give out loans that are very high in income, and if they didn't repay the loan, he would take their land, and that was sort of, they'd give that as compensation. But what this guy was so evil, this Haj Brum. His name actually wasn't Brum, but everyone called him Brum because it was a way, because he basically swept up the land, and they used the English word Brum in a sort of onomatopoeia way to show how it's like a sweeping broom. He just took the land. He had over 400 acres of land, and apparently that they use a different measurement, which is 600 relong, and apparently someone who has 200 relong, or not 200, 20 relong, is considered very, very rich. So this guy was ultra rich, and apparently he lived in a place like Razak, like a falling down house, and he he rolled his cigarettes, but like homemade. Like I think he made them out of leaves or something. Um, he was a very interesting character. He also used this other method of getting money, um, where another thing was when he'd give out these loans and people, when they actually did find the money to repay him, he would hide, so they couldn't repay him. So he'd take their land anyway. So that was pretty messed up. Then so back to the thing about Razak and this guy as an example. What they're showing is the differentiation between how people perceive the rich and the poor. Now, everyone discusses Haj Brum's exploits and they all make jokes about it, and they do this in I think they call it the, what is it, the in the oh, here it says the privacy. Basically, they do this in the privacy of their own home, and it's like a offstage. That's what they call it, the offstage environment. So apparently, if they was to insult Haj Brum and call him these sorts of things publicly, they could get in quite a lot of trouble, even though everybody does this. So then it gets really interesting, and they start talking about the symbolic balance of power. So they say how Razak is used as an example in the community of how the rich and the poor, how the rich don't want the poor to be, and how the poor don't want to be perceived. Because Razak is openly, blatantly, I'm poor, give me stuff. He begs for things and he requests it, and I believe he turns up to banquets uninvited and things like that. So Razak is used as an example of how not to be, and the Haj Brum and Haj someone else, which is kind of not important because it's just another example, but it's a similar person to Haj Brum. He is used as an example of how the poor and how generally people don't want the rich to behave. And they show how in this case and generally the rich have a lot less affected by status, of having a bad status. So the rich are able to they are rich mainly because they follow the Haj Brum ways of doing things. So the fact is they are less affected by having a bad reputation. So then they move on to talk about how these symbolic ideas of Haj Brum is a way of the poor of getting back at the rich. So what they're sort of doing is, so they say how those in power of the village are not in total control of the stage, and they may write the basic script for play, but because the poor, they are able to talk about them behind their back and anonymously slander them and maybe work slowly for them, they are able to get back at them. And the book uses an example of crossing the road. So what happens is when we cross the road, I think it was a very good example. We might like bring up our knees to show like we're hurrying up to cross the road, and even if we don't actually hurry up, it shows that we're sort of respecting the car that's coming's right of way. So this is what they're saying they do in this example. They might be openly nice, but they are able to symbolically comply, but they don't actually have to do it. Like when you move your knees up to cross the road, you don't necessarily have to run. You just have to make it look like you are carrying, like you are gonna speed up a little bit. So An example of this in this ethnographic case is when they say see these landowners out on the street, they might say hello, but that's it. That they'll just say the bare minimum, and it's like quite psychological, quite clever. Because for another example is they go to their banquets, and they go out to the banquet for the just to be polite, and they eat the food there, and then they go as soon as possible. So it's not direct conflict, but it's it is a still a good way of subverting their power. So they say the backstage is the only place that the terrain is relatively favourable to the meagre arsenal of the disadvantaged. So this is sort of the backstage. This is the not overtly obvious stage. So the fact is, a non-original, non-fresh context. Okay, so how they end the chapter I thought was very good. So we'll come to the end now. So what they say is the fact they start stating the reason for studying in this environment. They say that the fact that this is it's not a standout environment. It's not a situation that is very original, very unique. It's a similar situation that has occurred around the world in that there are the ruling class and there are the poor. This is something that you can almost see in every society. Hope not to be too wrong there, but it's something quite that covers quite a lot of societies. So what they're saying is by using a context that isn't very original, it's quite useful for understanding class conflict and the ways in which this society can use their weapons of the weak to subvert the power of the ruling class. So that is my understanding of the book, and I hope this helped you for the first chapter. So that was small art. No, that. Yeah, well, that was the first chapter. Thank you for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.